Hello everyone, Thor here. Brought my friend Bryan along. He's an expert when it comes to Starcraft, and we're going to talk a little bit about the history of online gaming and especially RTSs. And he knows more than probably me and most of the people I know. So I was big into Command and Conquer and big into Starcraft, as many people were. So this will be a lot of fun.
Okay, you ready to go?
Yeah, let's do it up.
Okay. So first off, I really wanted to thank you for doing what you're doing here at the channel. It's not very often that someone has such wild success in several different avenues and then decides to make something completely new and do it all by themselves without any of the industry support, which they could easily have gotten. And when you got with my personal assistant and I got with Jake and Stacy,
made this happen.
Your managers, and we found a way to make it work. Because as you know, Thor,
busy schedule.
I don't do interviews anymore.
You're retired.
I mean, this is a discussion. I understand. I'm not a big interview guy, right? I scrubbed a lot of my stuff on YouTube, and getting me out of the closet for this type of thing is pretty unique. But let's start. So a lot of you may know the game. You might know the sequel of Starcraft 2. That's one was released about 2010. It's much more current. But in 1998 is when the original Gangster was released.
Yeah, and actually, the first one was so big they made the remake recently too. The
remastered version just came out, I think, like less than a year ago.
Yeah, so that was
remastered.
Pretty big. People are still playing it till today.
So essentially, let's start at the beginning. So real-time strategy games were kind of some of the more realistic games you can make on a PC in the early 90s. You could take 3D renders and put them into sprites.
And they actually originated in the DOS days. There were some D&D related ones. I played some of those. Command and Conquer originated on DOS, which was a huge one.
So Command and Conquer was like the first mega mainstream one on PC where you could take the Brotherhood of Nod and the Global Defense Initiative, and you would play with these units. And they had it was a well-balanced game, and you would go ahead and fight, but StarCraft is what really brought it into the next generation and set the standard. You were using a full Windows machines, Pentium processors, and you could really get some very clear 2D isometric graphics that actually could really display like what a computer could do at the time.
It's really impressive how far they came from the 90s, early 90s Doom, all the way to the early 2000s with games like StarCraft and.
Yeah. So this is an interesting start off because Blizzard was known for their real-time strategies. They made Warcraft. They made Warcraft 2.
And then Warcraft 3 was
2000. 2000. And they came out with that after StarCraft. That was in development at the same time as StarCraft. There was some overlap. But essentially, everyone went nuts for Warcraft 2 because it was a super well-balanced game. And, you had, the orcs and the humans, and it just was so explosively popular. Everyone thought, okay, let's do Warcraft in space. Yeah. And actually, originally, they showed some betas, I think, at the 1995 or 96 E3, and it was essentially using the same engine. It looked like a cartoon version of what you would call Warcraft in space, and they pretty much got just brutalized for it. They were just like, this is essentially you're making a Warcraft expansion pack look like a space game. And so what they did is they went back to the drawing board, and over like 6 different alphas and a few betas, they made what ended up being, this revolutionary game where they took all the 3D renders and they brought it down to sprites. They did 3 or 4 full motion video segments per campaign, and they actually somehow and stuffed it on one CD. Still was able to do all kinds of audio.
And actually, I got to interject a little bit because that was really impressive at the time because a lot of the consoles had the Sega CD where the FMVs were like 160 by 3.
Yeah, and they were like interlaced, and it was like terrible. But essentially, the game it went through a lot of different iterations, and I've talked to you about this. It'd be hard to show, but the actual box artwork and graphics sometimes contains all kinds of pictures and screenshots of units that are actually displaying different abilities than what they can actually do in the game. Because during the different betas, but after they made the boxes, they changed the units and what they could do. Like units could fire at the space, when now in the game they can only fire at the ground. I think the Mutalisks would shoot green acid in the beta, but in reality they were like spore, essentially metallic or physical spores that they shot out of their bodies. But it was released in, I believe, March of '98, if I'm correct. It's very close to around those dates. and it just went nuts. It sold like crazy. Everyone was going insane. You had 3 different races, the Zerg, which are all...
And they had full campaigns each. Which...
Full campaigns, the full motion videos, and they structured the missions. Instead of like, say, Command & Conquer, where it was like essentially just build your base and go kill all the units, you know, they had all kinds of hero units.
The classic sandbag glitch everyone used.
Yep. And there was you know, glitches in this game too that they used to their advantage, like a supply depot wall where you could build this depot and units would get confused and you could be behind it shooting those units. But essentially the game went nuts. I mean, the full campaigns, you had a great story for every race. You didn't have to do any reading. It was all professional voice actors.
Which is huge. The game before that was Wing Commander that really hired voice actors.
Yeah, professional actors for their video and actual voice actors in the cockpits and things like that. It wasn't just probably a couple of people who worked at the studio and be like, okay, we have
a couple of programmers. It's like, hey, if you're not busy.
Yeah, so I got this game in 1998, so I was like 13 or 14, maybe 12. I don't even know.
I was 9.
And, you know, we just played it religiously, like all day long, 6 hours a day online. You'd play through the campaigns. You try never to use the cheat codes. And the units were balanced so well. It's like you could literally pick up with any one race and find a way how to counteract any individual unit that was coming at you. And they would constantly update the balance of the game, which is the one thing that's kept the game going in longevity. They would make it so that, like, if one race was getting too powerful and you could rush someone, they would change how much those units would cost or the production time, and
is well balanced. And another thing they kept it going too is in the sequel, both had really good modding communities that did like really cool stuff.
They gave you in StarCraft, they gave you your own MPQ editor, which would be your own map designer. So people, like, you know, for online, they had BattleNet. BattleNet was free. You could play online with people from different countries.
Linked to people all over the world, and which is interesting. I don't know if you remember GameSpy. Was that the big one for multiplayer games?
With the website or it was like a matching service.
Yeah, matching service.
No, they use BattleNet for.
Well, I know they use BattleNet, and I know that worked really well. But I'm just saying, like, the opposition, I think, was GameSpy was the big one.
Yeah, God, it's been a long time.
Just bringing you back, yeah. I remember
but you could play ladder matches. But the greatest thing is that you can make your own use map settings, where you would make your own custom maps, and you could just get like 7 people in there. You know, you could just play against computers, and obviously. The game exploded, and mostly I mean, it sold over 1 million copies here in the United States, but it sold gangbusters in South Korea. South Korea, they had Starcraft Dorito, Starcraft Soda, the internet cafes, which are much bigger over there.
Oh yeah, it definitely helped launch esports, which is a huge thing. And, like, you know, imagine if YouTube was around back then, it would have been all Starcraft videos.
It was nothing but Starcraft before the MOBAs and all those things, like League of Legends. You know, BlizzCon, all their conventions, and it was just like this insane game that took the world by storm because that just unbeatable replay value.
The one thing I got to say though is hopefully they don't. I'm a big fan of BioWare games, and they got bought out by EA. It's a shame Blizzard's not on their own because they used to do really cool things.
Yeah, and you know what? They had their own rules about releasing games. They would just always the big joke of Blizzard is that they'd have a release date, and then it would get a new release date, and then they just started saying whenever it's done. Is a release date.
Yeah,
and
but they always put out a good product. So
the greatest products. It just lasts forever online, and like generationally, everyone knows Diablo to this day.
Yeah, Diablo 2 was really the first one was huge. The first one is an improvement, and Diablo 3 has been big for a while. Diablo 4 is finally coming out,
but so what happened is they capitalized on the success of StarCraft in the same year with an expansion set called Brood War, but in reality. Brood War was part of the original game that they just couldn't finish. A lot of the game, again, in the opening cinematic, you see a Marine shoot a grenade at either a Hydralisk or a Zerg. They shoot some Zerglings and then they launch a grenade on a Hydralisk. Marines don't shoot grenades in the game. Back in one of the betas, they shot grenades, and so that video was made, obviously, like 1997 or early in 1998, and they kept it in there. I mean, most of the units were actually pre-made, and obviously they just built new campaigns. They didn't have as many full motion videos, but they did have full campaigns, full voice acting. They added 2 new units per race.
Well, it's just like
maps, designs.
Same thing is with the modding community. A lot of times, like when these things aren't finished, they'll actually take them and finish them or build off of them.
Yeah, and I remember going online and you would download your own exe files, and they would load all kinds of game assets where you could literally mod the game instead of just making like your own maps. Like sometimes, like if you had a Wraith, they would just take over that and add a completely different graphic for the Wraith and animations for shooting.
All the way to Starcraft 2, they were actually making their own MMO out of it.
Yeah, it was insane. I got involved in a Return Starcraft to beta project on the internet probably around like 2000, and it kind of fell apart, but they got like probably 70% of the way there, finding the actual game assets and making up based on pictures their own original beta units. In the beta, like SCVs, which are the Terran unit, which go gather mineral and gas, they could fly.
Yeah.
They can't fly, obviously, in the game, but you could back in the day. Even if there was an MPQ editor, which was the big main file in StarCraft was this big asset file, which hackers got a way to open up so you could see all the in-game assets, whether it was maps or portraits of units, animations, and there was all kinds of animations and portraits from units that they didn't include in the final copy, but was in all the in-game assets. So they had unit portraits for, I think for intro scene in StarCraft, you see essentially like a salvage freighter trying to pick up like a broken vessel. And the main guy's face who starts talking, he's actually a unit portrait, but doesn't exist in the game.
Yeah.
And that unit actually was a unit, again, in one of the betas, but doesn't exist in the actual game.
But they plan all the marketing and the videos beforehand.
But that's they always do pre-rendering of everything. But those are things that you can just chalk up to being like inside the game universe and not necessarily part of the game, right? But they obviously had different plans before release. And that's essentially both games in a nutshell. It's had just the greatest impact. It's kind of set the standard for what real-time strategy needs to be. Like, you couldn't get away with throwing just a bunch of 3D assets together, some basic level design, and go kill them. Rush, kill, just build units. You actually up the game for everyone, for Age of Empires and the sequels that came after that, for Civilizations, for anything.
And you look at Command and Conquer, they kind of were going neck and neck for a little while, but they made each other better.
Everyone makes the joke, did you play StarCraft 2? And that was Red Alert 2.
Yeah.
Red Alert 2 was essentially like the same type of looking game with like a diversity of units and the 2D isometric from
World War II set piece instead of in space.
Yeah, so like, and when it was 2002 and Red Alert 2 came out and there was no StarCraft 2 to 2010, I played the hell out of Red Alert 2. Red Alert 2 was like the bomb game.
It was.
Red Alert 3 kind of sucked, but Red Alert 2 was
was good. Yuri's Revenge, the sequel. That's getting off a little bit.
And that's what everybody wanted to play because it just reminded them of StarCraft.
Oh yeah, no, and the units kind of they threw in with the expansion. They threw in like Yuri, which kind of worked like the Zerg a little bit, like he did the mind control thing. So they definitely borrowed a lot.
Borrowed a lot of elements. To this day. I play StarCraft 2, or I have played StarCraft 2 about all the expansion packs, but I'll be calling up friends and like I'm literally saying, yo, let's go on BattleNet and play StarCraft 1 Bloodbath on this tiny little map where you can just kill everything in like 20 minutes. Because I probably played this game to this day more than I play any other game since.
And especially with the remake coming out, the remasters, so breathe new life in a way,
Yeah, uploading everything, upgrading everything to 4K, and just making it look like a beautiful game.
Optimizing it for modern systems.
So you can actually play it at a full screen and out a window.
Yeah.
And I think recently that may have gone free to play. These guys are free to play. You can download these for free, but I think it was $15 when that released, the 4K remaster. So, obviously they know the fan community still exists. Even when they released the 4K version, they made this really awesome internet videos, like 2 minutes long, where you see people in overseas, like looking outside windows, and you see like carriers and battlecruisers come and announcing that the 4K remaster was on its way. And it's just it's a game that's like, I think it's withstood the test of time. The reviews of the day were incredible. This is back in the day when they didn't do video reviews. When GameSpot.com and VideoGames.com, they would do reviews that were like 6 paragraphs. This got like like the equivalent of like an op-ed for it. They were giving it 10 out of 10s. It was like they were calling it the greatest game of all time at the time.
And also the internet was like in its, relative today infancy. Like, there weren't videos. It was just a bunch of sites that,
Yeah, you would get all your screenshots and maybe you might get like a 2-minute clip. But the entire industry, it's like video game reviews back then weren't much of a thing. They were like, I played this and this is what I thought. And it obviously it took time to develop to be almost like journalism for video games.
Also having to play over dial-up, it's a whole different experience.
Yeah. And you could do wireless area network. LAN parties with this. You could dial, directly in. You could do BattleNet. BattleNet was obviously the biggest one because it tracked you and put you on a ladder and all that stuff. I did beat a South Korean once in StarCraft, and the kid was probably 5 years old. I have no idea.
But you'll take it.
But I'll take it. I beat a South Korean in StarCraft, and that's all I need to know. It's just, I don't know. I think 20 years from now, people will still be talking about StarCraft, and maybe 20 years from now, they'll release StarCraft 3. It took 12 years between 1 and 2, and we can certainly talk about StarCraft 2 because that's a much broader game.
Yeah, I'll probably do that for like another video, because there's a lot to be said about that. And also, like, the footage of Ghost came up recently. That was interesting.
Yeah, so that was a game which, when I was, again, in 2004 and 5, still playing the hell out of StarCraft, everyone went nuts over because it was going to be going back. Blizzard back in the day did console games before they did PC games, and they were making their console game where you played a Ghost, which is a Terran unit that can, cloak, shoot nukes, and
it's a third-person shooter.
Rifle. And it was going to drop, and everyone was going nuts, and I was going to go buy an Xbox for it, and then, they said it wasn't up to their standards, so they scrapped it. Yeah, and it's been gone on the internet, and you're watching people play it now, and it seems like a lot of fun. I would definitely, if I could get a modded Xbox, like to play that.
But yeah, it's a lot. And then don't you have maybe we'll end on, don't you have a story about calling up Blizzard?
Oh, so back in the day, let me just pull this guy out. I think because my friend Eric used my CD key, because you would get a CD key when you would to be able to play online. Before
you had Steam and a library.
Yeah, you had and there was all kinds of CD key generators trying to cheat it.
Even before the CD key generators, they used to give you a notebook, and you'd have to read through the notebook and say, "Hey, this is the word.
And then
this is the
shot." But here's a partial part of my CD key from back in the day. I won't give it up, but my friend Eric, if you installed the full game and that Spawn, which is a piece of the game which you could play online with a friend, but only that friend. If you installed the full game and went online, they would see that you're trying to essentially steal copies of the game, and they'd lock you out. And one day, I got locked out, and I was so pissed, I actually just stopped playing online and only would play against the computer. And I just didn't want to call up because I was just so angry about it. But then once they went, StarCraft 2, everything downloadable, you could just go log into your Blizzard account. I went to their help section and started talking with the guy, and I was just like, dude. And this was probably 2016, but I was like 18 years ago or 15 years ago, I was like, you guys locked down my CD key and I want my goddamn game. I was like, this is my game. And they were like, well, what was your CD key? And I had memorized it by heart. I didn't have the actual case on me. And I was like, and I spit it all out to him. And I remembered that, and my friend Eric and I were so terrified that we'd lose the CD key, we committed it to memory over an entire night in 1998. And he's like, that's not a CD key for StarCraft because there's letters. And I'm like, no, dude, it totally is a CD key. You have no idea what you're talking about. In 1998, that was a CD key. And the CD key, that their name, it had changed into a million different letters and numbers and stuff like that. And he's like, well, I need you to prove it to me. And I was like, oh, I have a 19-year-old or 16-year-old CD case with it on there. And the guy literally made me take a picture of it, time-stamped, and show it to him. And then he's like, oh, I didn't know that they ever had that. He's like, they switched away from that evidently. I talked to a supervisor in 2004 or 5. He's like, that's why it probably didn't work anymore. I'm like, no, that's not the reason why it didn't work, but I definitely got locked out because Eric tried to install it. But he's like, okay, I just went ahead and gave you your copy online so I could just download it online. It's inconsequential now because it's free to play. You can download for free anyway. But it was crazy that I went to the Blizzard experts and they had no idea what the hell I was talking about. but I love the game. And 16 years later, I'm like, nope.
Yeah, I'm not giving my copy up.
Yeah, I'm like, I want my copy. It's my game, and I want to play it again. Because every time I download or buy a new tablet, touchscreen or something like that, I'm like, let me see if I can run StarCraft. Let me see if low-powered mobile processor or something like that. I'm like, let me see if I can throw StarCraft. And I just bought 14 or 13-inch tablet PC with an N4100 processor on it, like no active cooling type stuff. And first thing I did was I loaded StarCraft on it.
Of course.
Because if you want to kill some time, if you want to play a great game,
most people see if their computers can run Crysis. He sees if it can run StarCraft.
Yeah, Crysis 1 would still melt any computer to this day.
The new Crysis, the remaster's got a can it run Crysis mode to benchmark PCs.
Crysis still melts every computer. The 3090s will melt and cry when they try and run Crysis, but that's it for me with StarCraft. I mean, if you want, we can talk about it later. Maybe different videos, like little specific things about it, campaigns. But in a nutshell, probably a lot of people on YouTube don't have a huge knowledge about the game. They probably know it from like a,
Well, you and I were big PC gamers in the 90s when it was kind of a different time.
In its heyday.
Yeah.
Xbox
Alien versus Predator, you game down a PC if you want to do multiplayer. Unreal Tournament.
Consoles were a joke. Like, it limited you to like what you could do in a game. You couldn't do cheat codes. You couldn't mod it.
You can only play local.
Limited. Yep. You could only play local. There's very little internet connectivity. PC was the gaming culture. And then, PCs died for a generation or almost like 15 years, and then Steam brought it back. And it was probably, a different topic, but it was because of Crysis. People finally saw what PCs could do with that hardware, and they were like, what the hell were we even doing on a console? But, I never jumped on the console generations.
Yeah, no, same. I grew up a PC gamer, and I still am. So, I guess Thor and Bryan out.